Eddie, got it. Nice. Setting up. I'm just going to close that door drawer.
Press on.
Yeah. A bit more fun. We'll just close it. It's on the latch anyway, so it's fine. Gold.
Yeah, okay.
We are going to get started with our 3-step program. Number one is we're going to discuss what's going on this week in the calendar, what's happening on the calendar this week. Number two is we're discussing what's going on in the Parshah this week. And then the third step, which is the main step, for a practical, relevant life message that we can learn from this week's Parshah. Live with the Parshah in such a way that it should give us practical, inspirational guidance to be able to be more in tune with what Hashem has in mind for us this week. So we're starting off with what's happening in the Yiddish calendar, what's going on in the calendar this week. So we are right at the end. This Shabbos was the 12th day of Sivan. And Yud Beis Sivan is the final day of the completion of time to make up for Shavuot's celebration. And of course, that was a big day of the calendar in the times of the Beis HaMikdash. In the Beis HaMikdash times, everybody would go to the to go up to Yerushalayim to have Yom Tov close by to Hashem. And there was the mitzvah of Oilas Re'iyah, of bringing up a carbon when you came to Hashem, so you didn't come empty-handed. And that would have to be brought as soon as possible as a person could, but as a minimum within the 7-day period. And therefore, although Shavuos was only 1 day, they were able to bring the karbanos of Yom Tov up until Yud Beis Sivan, which is why we didn't say Tachnun the whole of last week, because it was all the Yemei Tashlumin. That's one big highlight. We started off our week with the completion Yemei Tashlumin. In itself brings us koyach. If we ever think that we missed something out, or we didn't grab the opportunity that came by our way, so then this week we learn and we try and live by making up for missed opportunities, number one. But also there's still more days in the week besides the Shabbos we started off with. Today was Yudalad. Tonight, Monday night, Tuesday is Tesvav Sivan. Tesvav Sivan is the day where we remind ourselves, we celebrate, we mark the beginning of the previous Rebbe's incarceration, where he was arrested by the communists on Tesvav Sivan. And there's the famous story of his daughter, Rebbetzin Chaim Mushka, who was at the house at the time. And when they stormed into the house, it was at night. And they were just sitting down to eat dinner as a family after the Rebbe had spent a lot of time seeing people and answering people's questions. And that's when the KGB stormed into the house, and NKVD in those times, and they started questioning and ransacking the house and searching the house. And Rebbetzin Chaim Mushka looked out the window and noticed her chassan, who eventually became the Rebbe, coming to visit the house. And famously, she called out the window, Schneerson, because her name was Schneerson. Her chassan's name was Schneerson. But she called out, Schneerson, we have guests. And those 3 words, we have guests, was enough to set into motion an enormous chain of events that helped eventually free the previous Rebbe from jail, because right away, the chassan of the previous Rebbe understood enough to mean that if there was guests in the house that she couldn't say who they were, and she had to shout out the window, there were certainly people who were unwelcome, and he immediately set into motion an international, literally, to international campaign. European countries, even the American government, campaigning to try and save the previous Rebbe's life. And in turn, it eventually did exactly that. Even after the previous Rebbe was sentenced to exile, his exile was shortened, and then he was eventually released until they made him leave the country. And the previous Rebbe left from Russia, which was Ukraine at the time, and then came across the border into Latvia, and from there into Poland, and that's where the previous Rebbe spent time. But it all started on Tesvav Sivan, and on Tesvav Sivan, the Rebbe would remark that day as the day of a journey. Of course, we could always look at it as a sad day, and on a basic level, it was a very sad day. It was a very worrying day. It was a day that sent shivers up the spines of everybody who was involved. It was a day of tragedy when it happened. However, the previous Rebbe taught us that even though it seems like something's a tragedy, he had to at the time, even while he was living through it, remind himself that it's from the hands of Hashem. And somehow he has to be able to continue forging on in the most difficult situations, and in prison, in interrogations, on the hardships that he faced. But the rule was the same. Whatever Hashem sends to me is now my challenge for this moment. And to do the next right thing is not to think about if only, how come, all these type of questions, but to focus on what do I need to do right now? What does Hashem want from me in this moment in time? And that's how I'm going to make everything that's taking place around me purposeful. I'm creating meaning into whatever else is going on. And this was the previous Rebbe's attitude to Tesvav Sivan. So that again, on a week like this week, where we have Tesvav Sivan in it, we want to try and give ourselves the koyach, the strength, the reassurance that Hashem didn't make a mistake. Not only Hashem didn't make a mistake, but Hashem has full faith in us. And when we can live up to that faith, it's not because if we do that, then we'll be okay. If we live up to what Hashem wants us to do, then we'll all of a sudden become okay. No, Hashem knows we're okay. Hashem believes in us. And therefore, because we're okay, because we're good, because we're so precious, that's why we're going to try and act that way as well. And every time we manage to do a little bit more of the right thing, we compliment ourselves and we celebrate the wins that we have, because this is what Hashem is telling us. Not that if you do the right thing, then I'll accept you. But because I accept you, because I treasure you, B'ni B'chayru Yisrael, that's why we do good things. And that's why we keep on trying to keep on Hashem's path. Hopefully we'll understand it. And even if we don't yet, we still keep on that path. It's Tesvav Sivan this week. It's tonight and tomorrow. Hashem should give us the koyach and the nachas to be able to have the clarity to do exactly that. So that's what's happening on the calendar this week. But let's talk a little bit about what's happening in the Parsha. I just want to start off with saying a major yashar koyach to Rabbi Chol and Cohen for sponsoring the material of tonight's class. As Hashem, maybe should bench them and the mishpacha with Tova and Nigla. They have mazel tovs going on, but also they should have lots of Yiddish, Chassidus, Nachas, and good health, prosperity always. What's going on in the Parsha? Is Parshas Behalosecha. Fascinatingly, we all know that there are 5 books in the Torah, Chamishe Chumshei Torah. However, the Jewish mysticism, the Kabbalah talks about the 7 Sfarim, and the 7 Sfarim of the Torah are broken down. Well, you have the regular 5 books, but in the book of Bamidbar, you can count 3 Sfarim within it. And if you do count it that way, Parshas Behalosecha has a part of each of those 3 inside. Why? Because in this week's Sedra, if you look inside the Torah, you have the upside down nuns. It's a small, tiny little section that's sandwiched with a upside down nun before it and an upside down nun afterwards. And that's the section of Yehi ben Soya Ha'arin V'Yoyim Moshe Kum Hashem Yinu Mivutovecha. That little section, says Rashi, is because the Torah is talking about our mistakes as a people. And there's a mistake beforehand, and there's a mistake afterwards. And in order that it shouldn't go on and on about having mistakes, the Torah puts in a middle section to break. So on a simple level, that's Hashem's making it a break, though it shouldn't sound so terrible that we did so many bad things. But on a slightly deeper level, it's also that we're learning that out of these things, we have the Eivisha telling us that there is a separate section sandwiched in here. And that separate section that's sandwiched in here is a different section into itself. It's a different sefer that could be looked at. And in that case, Parshas Behalosecha is a juncture that brings together 3 different levels, because whatever we're up to, we are covered in this Parsha. What is in this content of the Parsha? So the walk around, the summary of the Parsha starts off with a highlight of lighting up the menorah. Aaron and the Kohen Gadol, the Isha Chesed, the man who represented kindness, warmth, and would race, chasing and bringing peace to people who otherwise didn't have it. Comes along Aaron HaKohen, and he is told in this expression that he is going to light the menorah. What is he lighting the menorah? Rashi points out that he heard how all the other Shvatim, each one of them sent their Nasi, their prince, their leader, to bring a carbon to the Beis Hamikdash, and he was feeling bad. What about me? What am I going to do? And Hashem says to him, yes, indeed, you're different. You have a different avodah, but don't think that's because your avodah is less. Your avodah is more. And your avodah does not include bringing the whole elaborate carbon of the Chanukas HaMizbeach, the inauguration carbonis that the other 12 Shvatim did. But your carbon, and Hashem says to him, Chayecha, by your life, is much deeper and greater, and that will be the lighting of the menorah every day in the Beis Hamikdash. That's the opening of the Parshah. Behalosecha. Fascinating, we learn, doesn't say Behadlakoscha, Lahadik Ner Shel Shabbos Kodesh. We say that we light the candles on a regular Shabbos, but Aaron didn't just light the candles, Behalosecha, he lit up, he uplifted the light. And that was true because in his case, he had to go up steps in order to light it, but also he had to light and hold his lighting flame until the Ha'adsha shall heves Oila Me'eleha, until the flame he was lighting up had enough light in it that it would shine on its own. And only then could he remove his light. And this already teaches us an important lesson in life. If we are in a position of helping, of supporting, of lighting up someone else's flame, we've got to remind ourselves that it's not good enough just to do a basic, I'll tell you the secret, now go figure it out yourself. As part of chinuch, part of education, and part of sharing goodness, we must continue to share that goodness until the light is lit up all the way, that until the fire is flaming on its very own. One important lesson, Parshah. Parshah continues and talks about the Pesach Sheni story, which is actually the area we're going to focus on today. So we'll leave the story, for the Pesach Sheni story, for when we're reading inside the text. But suffice to say that the people who didn't bring the first Parah Pesach, who missed out on the Pesach Rishon, were able to bring the Pesach Sheni. The Parsha then continues on from there to talk about how Moshe Rabbeinu describes and teaches the Yiddish people the camping and travel formation. When the Yiddish people traveled through the desert, so they had to travel in a particular setup, and they had to travel in a particular way. So one Shevet knew exactly where they had to camp. The entire Shevet had to be around that area, near their flag. And the same thing with, don't know which Shevet, which group the Shevet was in. And then where the Shevet Levi, who were carried and transported. The Mishkan, they would also have to go in a particular formation, and that was all taught to the Yidden by Moshe. Moshe teaches them in this week's Parsha. We also learn, and this is part of the thing, one of my mistakes, the Yiddish trait of complaining. We complained about the man. We said, although the man is great and we don't have to work for it, or don't have to work hard for it, but it's boring. We want to have meat as well. Enough of this only man. And Hashem obviously wasn't very pleased, but Hashem sent us meat in the form of quail. And then also there was another story, and then Moshe Rabbeinu was told by Hashem, you know what? It's time for the Yiddish people, you have to take on elders who are going to help you govern the people. And instead of having just Moshe Rabbeinu teach us directly, Moshe Rabbeinu appoints the 70 elders, Simon's Canaan, and they become inaugurated. And they are going to now become the support team that are going to help Moshe Rabbeinu run the people. And in the end of the Parashah, we have the famous story of Miriam, Moshe Rabbeinu's sister, who spoke about Moshe in such a subtle form of Lashon Hara. Very. She had no intention of putting Moshe down. She wasn't looking to disparage Moshe, but in her level, it came across as Lashon Hara. And she was plagued with tzaras. And Moshe Rabbeinu davened for her. And she had tzaras only for 7 days. But amazingly, the Yiddish people didn't travel for the full 7 days that she had tzaras in recognition or in reward for the time that she had spent her time waiting for Moshe, who led the people, when Moshe was a tiny baby, and he was in the basket, and Miriam had waited alongside him at that time. Hashem rewarded her now that the people would wait for her. So that's Parshas Behalosecha in a nutshell. Now you could choose any area of the Parsha, and you had plenty to say, plenty to learn, because the entire Parsha is loaded. However, we're going to choose one particular area, and we're going to share a word in Yiddish. As good is besser nicht besser. If good is good, then better is certainly better. And then we add on a little extra, and best is best. I remember hearing in school, they used to say, good is not necessarily best, and the best is not necessarily good. True? Good is not necessarily the best, because you could do better, but being the best doesn't necessarily make you good. And that was said in the context of learning in order to win a competition. So if you have a competition and whoever gets the best mark is going to be the winner. So our teacher was explaining to us that being the best doesn't mean you worked hard. It doesn't mean that you did good. The fact that you're the best just means that no one else worked harder than you did, or no one else had a better head than you did. But the real way to measure what's good and what's better and what's best is to compete against ourselves. And that's a lesson to itself. But today we're going to be talking about something else. We're going to be talking about, and here you have the subtitle, the tagline is, why do Jewish people spend so much on their religion? The word is OTT. What's OTT? Over the top. Some Yiddish people will go literally over the top in order to do their mitzvahs. Think about the Yom Tov of Pesach, just to choose one, where you have some people who go so much sugar on every single chumrah, and they're driving themselves and their families and the surroundings so hard just in order to do it one more step properly and one more level better. And then you have other people say, it's not for me. I'm just going to be yotza. I'll make sure I'm not breaking the rules and I'm good to go. So we're asking ourselves, why do those who go so much sugar? And if it's commendable, what about those people who don't go crazy about the mitzvahs? We're certainly not here asking to judge ourselves, to judge others. We're asking ourselves, what do we think we should or shouldn't do? If anyone wants to unmute themselves and weigh in on this question, OTT for mitzvahs, commendable or not commendable?
I think it also depends on how they're done. So especially with Pesach, when it's done OTT, so really to the T, then at least I know for myself, I can get quite frazzled, and that isn't a good vibe for the family. So they might actually don't like it very much because they feel like this is just not a nice atmosphere to be in. You know, they'll be all the time worried, oh, this might and this might and this might. Whereas taking it slightly more, being focused more on the relational aspect and realizing it's also important to create a good environment in this doing the mitzvah, might not be so to the T, but at the same time might be a much better experience for everybody involved.
Wow. Thank you for sharing. That's very, very important point. Great. Anyone else want to agree or add to that?
Yes, I would. Good evening, Rabbi Kievman. It's Mrs. Smith speaking.
Go ahead.
It comes down a lot to definitions as well. Who is the one who is Meshuggah from? The one who keeps a bit more than me. Who is the one who's not from enough? The one who keeps a bit less than me. So everybody on their own level, and also some people go Meshuggah from for Pesach, but they're not bothered about kashrus or anything else the rest of the year. So what's the point of that? I think that there should be a middle ground. And as Mrs. Fabry so correctly said, it's also important that the family feels relaxed, that everybody feels happy and everything. So I would agree with her totally, but I just wanted to add that in as well.
Fantastic. We're doing well. Anyone else want to weigh in on this? I'm going to add, if you want to say, please speak up anytime. I'm just going to add that there is a mitzvah d'oraisa called Simchas Yom Tov. We chose the example of Pesach. Maybe it wasn't the perfect example because everyone has feelings towards Pesach. It does come with a lot of things. But the mitzvahs asay min haTorah of being happy on Yom Tov is also something that has to be OTT. And therefore, weighing up chumras of Hidur mitzvah compared to the mitzvahs, the positive commandment of being happy, you could say you're being mehader in the mitzvah of simcha at every level, and that's probably a good starting point because you're putting the deraisa and the chumras of the deraisa ahead. But yes, it doesn't take away though that even a basic Pesach preparation does require a lot of effort. It really does. And the same is true with many other mitzvahs that we fulfill. They do require effort. And even if we're not going to do it, let's say the most strictest level, if we take a middle ground, often we're pushing ourselves beyond the bare minimum. And it's almost acceptable. We kind of expect ourselves sometimes to not just do what we can get away with, but to do a drop more. The famous question is, what's wrong with doing this, that, and the other? What's the big deal if I don't do this, that, and the other? That sort of approach, we often find ourselves not even asking that question. We just go straight into it. Yes, maybe we'll scale back it towards the end or when it gets too intense, but our starting motive is to try and do it at the best possible level that we can, or that we can feasibly, or we can without getting frazzled. But our direction is to try and do it as best as we can. And what we're doing is we're playing devil's advocate. We're just asking, maybe we've got it all wrong. Maybe we shouldn't be doing that. And of course, the answer is yes, we should. We're asking ourselves, why do we? Why is it that that's become a norm? And also we're asking is, what about those people who don't? So I want to start off with what about those people who don't? And start off by saying we are not the judge. We don't want to judge. We aren't looking to be the judges. And if I find myself being a judge, I need to remind myself that Hashem is the judge and Hashem knows everything. So what happens to those people who don't isn't really a question. It's not a question I have to be asking myself. And certainly if it becomes a question, I need to remind myself that the short answer is it's none of my business.
Maybe.
Go
I
ahead,
was just
please.
going to say, maybe the people who you don't think do a mitzvah or haven't done one actually can learn from you, from looking at you. And if they see you do something, they will eventually think, that's a good way to be. So maybe the loveliest mitzvah is a quiet one. It doesn't have to be about Pesach. It can be smiling at the person.
Yes.
It can be speaking. It can be doing so many small things each day. And all those things are mitzvahs. And maybe people do that. And maybe you just don't see it sometimes. I think everybody does something.
There we go. Yeah, we've added that already. Thank you for adding that in. Very helpful. Yes, this is what we're talking about. But let's now shelve the question about other people. Because as we just said, we don't know.
No.
Not only we don't know, even if we know, we think we know, we still might not know. So the question about others, what other people are doing is on the side. What we're asking really is, which direction should I be taking? And if it's okay for somebody else, maybe it's okay for me. And for that, we're going to judge. So I will judge what I should be focusing on. And that's what we're going to talk about. We're going to talk about what are my options and what should I be choosing out of those options. And the conversation, we're going to make it, try and build it around the story of this week's Sedra that we didn't speak in detail. We're going to do that now. And that's the story of the Pesach Sheni. Let's read it on the screen. Just going to zoom in on it a little bit. If I could. Okay.
It's just a blur, sorry.
Is it still a blur?
No, it's better now.
Oh,
Thank you.
That's what time does. Can I know? Yes. Thank you for pointing it out, though.
Thank you.
So the Pasuk is telling us what happened after Moshe Rabbeinu told the Yiddish people that we have to bring a carbon, and the carbon can only be brought for those who are tired. Just the background, the year that we are in right now, as in the story is the year 2449 from creation. The Yiddish people have had a very, very tumultuous year. A lot of things have happened. In the year that just flown by for them, they had left Mitzrayim, they had crossed the Yam Suf, they had received the Torah, had the Egel Hazav danced around the golden calf, and all the punishment and all the heartache that followed that. Then after Yom Kippur, they had the second set of luchos. They learned the halachis, and they'd started building a mishkan. And finally, the Rosh Chodesh Nisan had come, and they had the mishkan go live, and it worked. What does it mean? It worked. We invited Hashem into the base of Migdal, to the mishkan, and the fire came down on the mizbeach. Hashem demonstrated miracles that showed that He was there. There was a cloud of kedusha, Anana Kavod, hanging over the mishkan that they had built for Hashem. Hashem was present in the mishkan that they made. And now they were about to reach the first anniversary of becoming a people. The first anniversary of Yetzias Mitzrayim. And Hashem says to Moshe, this is how I want you to teach the people to celebrate our anniversary. What are you going to do? You're going to make a Seder night. And at the center of the Seder is going to be a Korban Pesach, very similar to the first Korban Pesach that they made while they were still in Mitzrayim before they left slavery entirely. And now we're going to do it in freedom, and it's going to be a Korban Pesach. It's going to be actually, turns out, the only time they made a Korban Pesach outside of Eretz Yisrael from when they left Mitzrayim, because they weren't going to make a Korban Pesach all the years later until they came into Eretz Yisrael. But this Korban Pesach, they were instructed to do it, and this was going to be the first anniversary after such a difficult year, such a big deal of a year. We're finally going to have a Korban Pesach and celebrate Yetzias Mitzrayim. But there were people who missed out on that opportunity. So Pasuk K, and the nation brought the Paschal offering in the Sinai desert on the 14th day of the first month, and Bnei Yisrael conformed to all the instructions that Hashem gave Moshe. There were men who were ritually impure by contact with a dead body and were unable to bring the Pesach offering on that day. And they approached Moshe and Aaron on that day. Now, just take note of what they say to Moshe and Aaron when they come forward, because we're going to revisit this. So Pasuk says, on that, and these men said to him, we are impure by contact with a dead man. Why should we lose out and be unable to bring the divine offering in its time among the children of Israel? And Moshe replied, stand and wait while I hear what Hashem will instruct you to do. Hashem spoke to Moshe saying, speak to Bnei Yisrael and say to them that any man who will be impure by contact with the dead or is on a distant journey, whether among you today or in future generations, whether among you today or in future generations, should bring the Pesach offering to Hashem. They should bring it even on the 14th day of the second month, Iyar, a month later. They should eat it along with matzah and bitter herbs. They should have it, Korban Pesach, with matzah and maror and Pesach Sheni. Now I'm just going to look back at Pasuk 7, Pasuk Zayin one more time. What did they say to Moshe Rabbeinu? We are impure, contact with a dead man. Why should we lose out and be unable to bring the divine offerings in its time among Bnei Yisrael? So this is the famous source of a brand new mitzvah that was invented by the people. Now, obviously, the people didn't turn it into a mitzvah. Hashem made it into a mitzvah. But it was in the merit of the people asking for a second chance that Hashem wrote up a new mitzvah for them. And amazingly, we see how Moshe Rabbeinu, when he got stuck for an answer, he says, wait right here. I'll be right back. I'm just going to speak to Hashem with 100% confidence that Hashem would answer. Okay. Chassidus. Chassidic teachings. What do we know in Chassidus about Pesach Sheni? Help me out.
So, Rabbi Kiepman, it's a blur again.
A blur again? Oh, sorry, it's Rabbi Cohen, but the blur will probably take time for your computer to download the image.
Okay, fine.
Yeah?
Oh, thank you.
Every time I change a slide, you'll probably get the blur, and then once it's fully uploaded or downloaded, you'll get it clear. Pesach Sheni says the Hayom Yom, quote from the Frierdiker Rebbe, the theme of Pesach Sheni is, es is nishtar kein verfallen. It is never too late. It is always possible to put things right, even if one was richly impure or one was at a distance, says the Frierdiker Rebbe, even in a case when the failure to bring the offering was deliberate, we can nonetheless correct it. That's the halacha. someone who intentionally did not bring the carbon Pesach Rishon, would be allowed to rectify their mistake and bring a carbon Pesach Sheni. Now, of course, the message isn't just that there's one more chance. The message is that if there was something that was missed, we can rectify it as a second chance. But second doesn't just mean the number 2. Second means there's another chance. And of course, Chassidus makes a big deal out of this, that it's never too late. It's never too late. It's just so deep to remind ourselves that there's always a way to come back. The door is never closed, and equally, we should never close the door on anyone else around us, even if it looks like it's really bad. Even if it looks like it's terrible, we don't close the door. And that's the message of Pesach Sheni. Fascinating. Okay? Of course, Chassidus asked the question, which we're going to put here 1 second. Let's just leave this in a minute. Why did Hashem not give us the mitzvah of Pesach Sheni on his own? If Hashem knows what's going to happen, and Hashem knows everything that's coming anyhow, so why did Hashem wait for us to realize that we're missing out on the mitzvah? And then come and complain to Hashem and say, please, can we have a chance? And then Moshe Rabbeinu asks Hashem, and Hashem says, fine, you can have a second chance. Couldn't Hashem give us the second chance on his own? And the answer is no. No. Because second chance is a creation that was created by the people. Second chance means that when the person is determined to want to be able to do the right thing, that's when the doors open for the second chance. So effectively what we're learning is that past mistakes can always be corrected on the screen. Can always be corrected. But, qualifier, only if we take the initiative. If I am not searching for a way to make it work, then the door will look closed. When I push through the door is open. And this is what we learn from Pesach Sheni. It's amazing. It's fascinating. When it looks like, oh, there's no second chance here. Look, I've really messed this one up. There really is no second chance. That is exactly where Pesach Sheni talks. It talks to a situation where it looks like there is no second chance. And that's when there is a second chance. When the person sees that it looks like it's a real mistake, when we take the initiative, then we can correct it. And that is the general Hasidic talk. It's a big deal. And we've discussed this probably last year twice and the year before, once on Pesach Sheni and once in Parshas Behalosecha. Today we want to learn the Chelik Yud Chesicha, which takes it a step further. It's fascinating. It's just tremendous how it plays. Whatever we've accepted until now, just make it even closer to us. Make it more doable. Make it within our reach, one step more. And that's what we want to do. We want to build off what we've just summarized. That could have been a full share to itself. We've almost assumed that we know it. We've summarized it in a nutshell. And now we want to build off this. Explain it a little deeper. As long as we ask for something, we can get it. As long as we look for a second chance, even though it's our own mistake, with no one else to blame. No one else to blame. We can still push forward. We can still open the door and Hashem will make sure that we can correct it. Now we want to take it a step further. And the way we're going to do this is we're going to describe what we're going to learn, explore a Mishnah in Maseches Pesachim. It's a Mishnah. It's not a very long Mishnah that we're going to read. It's detailed, it's nuanced, but we're going to read it and then we're going to ask if anyone would like to summarize in your own words what we're learning in the Mishnah. This Mishnah is giving us three opinions. Three opinions, yeah? 2 Jews, 2 opinions. This is 3 Jews and 3 opinions as to how we understand the connection or the relationship between Pesach 1 and Pesach 2. We have now discovered there's 2 Pesachs, it's this week's Sedra. How do they work with each other? We do know that someone did Pesach 1 doesn't do Pesach 2. Someone who's doing Pesach 2 is because they missed Pesach 1. So they seem to be very much connected. Not only connected, they work off each other. Says the Mishnah in Pesachim, Rebbe says Pesach Sheni is its own festival. Regel b'fnei atzmoihu. It's a Yom Tov for itself. Reb Nosson argues, and Nosson says it's a tashlumin, it's a redress, it's a patch that covers over and refixes the first Pesach. However, it does not restore, it's not a restoration of the first Pesach. Rabbi Chananya ben Akavia says, Sheni takanta derishon hu. The second Pesach is a restoration of the first Pesach. It does restore the first Pesach. That is the Mishnah that we want to focus on tonight. And if anyone feels comfortable sharing your own words, a summary of what we just read in the Mishnah, please. Anyone into technicalities and nuanced observations, please.
So as far as I understand, one says it's a separate festival, has nothing to do with the other one.
Yes?
The next one says it makes up for the other one, but it's not a full makeup.
Okay.
And the third one says it's a complete makeup. So you either keep that one or that one, and they are equal.
Amazing.
Is that roughly it?
It's spot on.
Okay.
Now, I'm just going to point out, that was great. Thank you very much. That's very well explained. We almost did it in gradations. Mitzvah for itself, it's a mitzvah that actually fixes the previous mitzvah that was lost a little bit. Or as level 3, it entirely fixes the previous mitzvah. Yeah, so it's like a step-by-step. Halachically, there are actually halachic ramifications, which are on the next slide. We don't have to do inside. And the question is, imagine, Pesach 1 comes along and I say to myself, I cannot be bothered Pesach. I'm so fed up of Pesach. Chas v'shalom, I never said this, but if someone says, I can't be bothered bringing the Korban Pesach, I'm doing Seder this year, I am not bringing a Korban Pesach. What's the punishment? Anyone know? What is the punishment for not bringing a Korban Pesach? Intentionally. It's quite extreme. Usually, when it's a positive command that I broke, I was supposed to do something and I didn't do it. How did I break the commandment? With no actions. By not acting, I broke a positive commandment. Let's just say I have a mitzvah to make kiddush on Friday night. It's the 10 commandments. And I intentionally did not make kiddush. I've broken the commandment to make kiddush. Let's say it was intentional. But I didn't do anything to break the commandment. I didn't do something, which is what broke the commandment. I broke the mitzvah by sheva al tase, by remaining mute or by not doing what I was supposed to do. Usually you cannot receive a punishment for not doing something. Does that make sense?
Mm.
Compare that to if the Torah says do not do something. How do I break a command of not doing something? By actively doing it. That's punishable. So generally speaking, a mitzvah saseh, breaking a mitzvah saseh is not usually punishable because I didn't do anything. I should have, but I didn't, and therefore I didn't. Except for 2 mitzvahs. And the 2 mitzvahs are Pesach and Bris Milah. Not giving a bris to my child, or more importantly, if my parent didn't give me a bris and I went through my whole life without giving myself a bris, that's punishable. And the other one is Korban Pesach. If I intentionally did not bring a Korban Pesach, it's punishable by Koris. So it's not the local Beis Din that'll do anything. It's not even the big Beis Din. Hashem says that it's punishable by a Min HaShamayim punishment. It's punishable by Koris. But that's for not doing something. That's when I didn't do it intentionally. Okay. If I didn't do the first Pesach.
Is it also the same for bris? Also Karis?
Karis, correct.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, correct. So if a person intentionally did not do the first Korban Pesach, what should they do? Bring the second Korban. Bring the Pesach Sheni. And if they do, they will not be punished for not bringing the first one. What happens if they wanted to bring the second Korban, but by mistake or b'shoigeg, they were unable to bring the second Korban Pesach? Now the question is, do they still have the punishment pending for the first one or not? And that would be the difference between the two opinions, the last two opinions. The first opinion will say, it doesn't fully fix the first one. So if you manage to bring the second Korban Pesach, then you've saved yourself the terrible avera of missing the first one. But if something came up and I didn't, then the first terrible sin is still in its place, and therefore it's still punishable by Karis. Whereas the second opinion will say, no, the second Pesach Sheni replaces the first one, and we stop looking at what happened in the first month. So the Karis is automatically wiped clean immediately, even though it was intentional. And then we only look at the second Korban Pesach if it was intentional or unintentional. That's the halachic difference between the three levels. But what we're going to do for today is ask you to imagine there's only two groups. The first opinion says it's a brand new Yom Tov, unrelated. And by the way, that's the halacha regel b'fnei atzmai. And then there's the other opinion that says, no, it's much connected. Which one did we say is the halacha? Regel b'fnei atzmai. It's not connected, it's not dependent, it's not related to the first carbon. It's a Yom Tov, Pesach Sheni is a Yom Tov for itself. And that's the halacha. And we're going to focus on this. We're going to ask ourselves, how does that sit with us? I ask you a question. Does it make sense to you in any way to suggest that Pesach Rishon and Pesach Sheni are not connected? Any questions that you can ask on us saying that Pesach Rishon and Pesach Sheni are not connected, it's separate Yom Tov? Anyone?
They have almost the same name, so that's one
Yeah.
thing.
They have the same name, very good. What else? Rishon Sheni. Not only the same name, they've actually called a first Pesach and a second Pesach. Second Pesach means that it's the second from the first. Great. We've got two. What else do we have that would clearly indicate that Pesach Rishon and Pesach Sheni are connected? Who brings the Korban Pesach Sheni? Only somebody who didn't bring Pesach Rishon. And if you did bring Pesach Rishon, you don't bring Pesach Sheni. If you did bring Pesach Sheni, it's because you didn't bring Pesach Rishon. They're clearly connected. And if you want to ask the Hasidic question, our whole message of Pesach Sheni, and it's never too late, is all based off the idea that it's a replacement for the first one. And that's gone out the window if we say it's not connected. So clearly, Rebbe doesn't literally mean that they're not connected. We have to better understand what Rebbe is saying. We have to re-understand when he says it's a separate Yom Tov, does he really mean it's less than the first, the second and third opinion? Or does he mean something else? And what we're going to discover is that if we put on a Hasidic pair of glasses, if we delve into a little deeper about what Rebbe was telling us, we're going to discover that the Pesach Sheni, the way it is halachically, not only is it at least a restoration of Pesach Rishon, it's a restoration plus more. It's a new Yom Tov, not that it's less than restoring the first Yom Tov. It restores the first Yom Tov, but it makes it as good as new. And when we say it's a new Yom Tov, we don't just mean it's a new Yom Tov, regel b'fnei atzmai. It's a new Yom Tov unrelated to the previous Yom Tov, because clearly it is related. It's a new Yom Tov that gives us a chance to make it new, to make it again from itself on a new level. The way we're going to do this is we're going to look at the word tashlumin. What does the word tashlumin sound like to you? Tashlumin. What word might be from the same root? Anyone? Complete. Shalem. Or l'shalem means to pay completely. Shalem, a good word. Anything else? Give me Ingos. Shalom is peace. So we've now got complete and peace. Two translations. There's one more. Anyone? The simple meaning of the word tashlumin actually doesn't mean not complete and not peace. Lahashlim means to fill in. Tefillin was, it's got to do with complete. Or it's got completing. Maybe that's the other word we're looking for. Something that is being completed is to fill in that which is lacking, lahashlim. Then you have something that's shalom, something that doesn't need anything filling in because it's complete already. And then you have shalom, that's peace. Yemei tashlumin, or a yom tov of tashlumin, could either mean a yom tov that is filling in which is lacking, or we're going to borrow the translation that we had here. It's not completing something, it's the complete idea. Something that is perfect or perfecting. I'm going to use the word perfection with a qualifier. We don't mean perfection in the sense that something is perfect, because as human beings, we never are expected to be perfect. But we're going to use the word perfection as in the sense that we aspire to be as perfect as possible. But that sort of completion is not because we are lacking. So to put it on the screen in images. On one hand, you can have something that is very complete because it lacks for nothing. There's nothing missing in this house, and therefore it's a complete house. And then you have something that's completion. Not only it lacks for nothing, it wants nothing. There's nothing wanting about it. There's nothing better you can have about this. Is that the same? Or are we seeing two types of complete? One type of complete that there means there's nothing bad about it. And the other type of complete is that there's nothing better than it. Which one of them is the real complete? Is one of them incomplete? Not necessarily. Having a house that could be better doesn't make it an incomplete house. It's still a complete house. However, if you have the dream house, if there's such a thing, that could never be better, if there's such a thing, that would be a more perfect house, you could say, a more complete house, not because the other one's less complete, but just because there's a higher level of completion. Just to do two quick examples of this. One example is a year has 12 months in it. However, the halacha talks about the complete year. Here you have it in the Torah. Adam loishiloi shana tamima. The pasuk is talking about how much time a person has to redeem, to buy back a house that was sold. If I came short on funds and I had to sell my ancestral house, and it's in a walled city, it's a house that I have, it's a family house. If I had to sell it, it says the Torah, I get 1 year to buy back the house before it's lost forever. And if I find money in that 1 year, it makes no difference who I sold it to. I have the right to buy it back within the year because it's an ancestral house. How long do I have? A year. How long is a year? 12 months. Says the Torah, no, Tamima. What does that mean? Says the Gemara, Tamima teaches me that when you have a 13-month year, like we have now, which is a leap year, the Shana Tamima, complete year, I get to buy back the full 13 months. So let's just say practical example. God forbid I had to sell my house because I couldn't afford to live. And I desperately looking for money to be able to buy back the house. And after 12 months and 2 days, I finally find the money. I rush back to the buyer and say, I finally found the money, sell it back to me. Says the seller, says the buyer, no, you had 12 months and it's 12 months and 2 days. But then I realized, actually, indeed, it's 12 months and 2 days, but it's a Shana Mu'uberes, it's a leap year. And therefore, I haven't finished the year because there's 13 months in the year. He says, no, you want about 12 months is 12 months. I don't care about 13 months. We rush off to Beis Din. Says the Rav to us, Shana Tamima, a complete year. A complete year means 13 months. And that's why when we talk about the calendar, we call this year a Shana Tamima, a complete year. Because there's a year, and then there's a complete year that means something more than just a year. A 12-month year is a year. And it's, of course, complete. But then you have more complete than that. More full than a full year. You might call it a perfect year. A year that cannot be bigger. And that's the leap year. And the halacha will tell us that a Shana Tamima, a complete year, is more than just a full year. It's a year that cannot be bigger, and that's called a Shana Tamima. So in a sense, you have sometimes that something's good, it's full, but it still can be more. You can add to it. It's another example of tzedakah. Now, you have something that's broken and you need to fix it and bring it back into a state of repair. That's one challenge. There's another challenge, which is not only to take something that is in a state of disrepair and repair it. You have something that's in an okay state and you want to bring it to the level of perfect, the best possible way. I ask you, which one is easier? To repair something that's in a state of disrepair and make it back into a working state, or to take something that's in a working state and make it the best possible way? The best possible way. Which one's more effort? Which one is more of a challenge? Well, you can tell me, it depends how broken it is, right?
Yeah, the first one, isn't it?
I'm going to suggest
the first one's a bigger challenge. In some ways.
Repairing something that's in disrepair is a very big challenge. However, it's not open-ended. You know where you are, you know what you need to get it to do, and therefore you work towards that. It's either possible or it's not possible. With a bit of effort, a bit more effort. And as we're learning Pesach Sheni, there's always a way to bring it back. However, to say that we can bring something that's already working and we can make it better until we can say that this is right now the very, very best it will ever be. It cannot be better than this. That's a much taller order. First of all, because it's open-ended to get to that level. And second of all, however good it is, you can always make it a little bit better. And what we're going to learn here is that there is an added element into the halacha of Pesach Sheni that tells us not only does the Pesach Sheni Jew have the power to repair something that was in a state of disrepair. And as we say, it's not just a makeup date in which we can catch up on Pesach Sheni, but the halacha wants us to know that when it comes time to make something up on Pesach Sheni, we have, as the Pesach Jew, the power to be able to rectify a mistake until the very, very best possible way. I'm going to read this inside in the text. I'm sorry if it's blurry, but it should shape up in a moment. I'm going to just zoom this in and bring it here. According to Rebbe, who was the first opinion in the Mishnah, whom the halacha follows, when we bring the Pesach offering on Pesach Sheni, the 14th year, it is a complete and independent Pesach offering. So in addition to fulfilling that what was missed on the first Pesach, we have a brand new Pesach. This means that the 14th of year is the right day, the correct festival for this Pesach offering. When we say that the motif of Pesach Sheni is it's never too late, we mean not only that we can make up for something that we had missed, which is in a general repair, we mean more than that. I'm just going to scroll this up. We mean that we can accomplish it perfectly with every detail intact. When we say the Pesach Sheni is not a restoration, the first of Pesach, but rather an independent festival, we mean that it's not merely a restoration that fills in the gaps that we missed, rather it is its own festival that was previously missed, is completed to perfection. We'll put another slide on here. Oh, you see this? It's a chance, it's a change, but here's what we want to say. It's not just that we can change the past. It's that Hashem has created a new opportunity that was to do the actual full mitzvah. It's another chance. Not just that we'll say, well, wait, turn a blind eye to that was a miss. I want to do a quick muscle. We're racing against the clock here. But let's just say I run a company and I hired a secretary and he or she was going to do a report of the inventory and whatever else it was. And we agreed that we'll have it ready in a week and a half, deadline. And we agreed which points would be in it. A week goes by and there's nothing there, and a week and a half goes by, there's still nothing. 2 weeks later, I get a report that's half-baked. It's missing half the information. It's a week and a half late. And here we are. This is what they produced. So I call them in for a meeting and I say, look, we made up a time. We made up what's going to be in. You've not produced. I can't take this. This is not what I hired it for. So they say, you know what? Give us another chance. They go back, and sure enough, in 3 days, they produce a beautiful, gorgeous report. Everything's included. I ask you, have they made up for their mistake? They brought a full report, and it's a great report, but they haven't made up for being trustworthy. They haven't made up for the missed time. They haven't made up for meeting the deadline. They've produced a great report, and they've done very well. And I'm grateful for what they've done. Their second chance they've used, but they haven't really brought back that which was missed. But Hashem tells us, I want you to know, by pushing through the door, you haven't just managed to tick the boxes. It says, Rebbe, the halacha of Pesach Sheni is, there's a new Yom Tov. And this new Yom Tov is connected to the previous Yom Tov, and it's based off the fact that I missed the previous Yom Tov, which is why I need a second Yom Tov. But don't look at this as just a restoration of the details that were missed. It's a Yom Tov and a regal b'fnei atzma. I'm going to do one more text here. Pesach Sheni was for those Jews who were impure. And note, after acknowledging and confessing their own impurity, they didn't live in denial. They didn't try to whitewash their situation. They didn't try to ignore that they were impure. They confessed. They did vidur, which is part of teshuvah, very similar to teshuvah miyava. They then approached, after saying, we are impure, they said, therefore, we are impure by contact with that person. Why should we lose out and be unable to bring the divine an offering in its time among the children of Israel? We don't just want to say, you know what, it's okay. We don't want it's okay answer. We want to be able to be at the same place that everyone else was, to be able to make amends, to be able to be reaccepted, to be welcomed in, not just as second class, but as 100% fully in. Why do we want to do that? Because we're not happy just to say that we'll be okay and we'll be good. But we want to strive for the very best. And this was an expression of the tshuva that works. And fascinatingly, this becomes the halacha of Pesach Sheni. Where's it gone? I've lost the text. The halacha is, someone who converts between the first and second Pesach, similar to a minor who turned bar mitzvah between the two Pesachs. Should they bring a Pesach Sheni or not? They didn't miss the first Pesach because they weren't obligated in the first Pesach. So should they still bring a Pesach Sheni? And the answer is yes. And this halacha is the key to understanding how powerful Pesach Sheni is, or how powerful the Pesach Sheni Jew and their passion is. The child who turned bar mitzvah after Pesach Rishon has every reason to say, I owe nothing. I did nothing wrong. I wasn't obligated in the first Pesach. I don't have to bring the Pesach Sheni. Similarly, someone who wasn't Jewish at the first time, so they have to bring a Pesach. Says halacha, yes. And Chassidus will tell us the reason. Because the message of Pesach Sheni isn't just, you can get away with it, you'll have another chance. The message is exactly the opposite. The second chance is not only to be able to make do. The second chance is that today you can become the very best ever. And so young child who's just turned bar mitzvah, or ger who's just become this guy, today, why should you lose out on anything less than the very best? So instead of asking what's wrong with not doing a Pesach today, ask, why should I have anything less than the very best Pesach today? And the Allah will tell you, you can and should bring the Pesach Sheni. That's on the Pesach Sheni in the literal form. And what's the Pesach Sheni message to us? The Pesach Sheni message to us is that there's a regular Pesach will tell us you can do good things. And the Pesach Sheni Jew says, I will settle for nothing less than the very best that I could do. And anything short than that, I'll keep on pushing to try and come the very best that I can do. And Pesach Sheni teaches us that yes, we can. The door opens up when we push through it. The door opens up not just that we can be in a state of repair after being in disrepair, much more than that. We can push harder and further still. I've gone 3 minutes over. I appreciate your time and I respect it. Thank you for staying on. Hashem should bench us with a koyach, the clarity and the determination that we should know. Hashem believes in us. He does. He gives us this koyach. We start off by saying that it's Tesvav Sivan tonight. The Frierdiker Rebbe saw in a state of the most difficult challenges that he went through in incarceration in the prison of the communist regime. He saw it as a special day to commemorate and to celebrate. And equally learning the message of Pesach Sheni, of course we have a second chance, especially then when the door looks like it's shut and it looks like there's no one else to blame but me. And even then, and even if the door looks like there's nowhere to go, that's when the Torah tells us the door will open, not just to let us through, but to let us past and to bring us to a place where it couldn't have been better. We not only didn't miss out, we didn't miss out on anything. Hashem should give us the brachas, the clarity, the excitement, the passion, and the nachas, good health, prosperity always, a good gesunte Woche, a gesunte Sommer, and please God, next week, same time, same place. Questions,
Amen.
comments, and suggestions are welcome.
Amen.
You want to say a big yes
Thank you
to
Can I just ask a question about this week's Sedra? It was
Please.
very much about Moshe Rabbeinu. It was very much about him going through a very hard time. In fact, it says in some places he had a depression because he felt... I read it every day. Come on.
Okay.
So it said that he didn't know what to do. That was why he got the 70 elders, because he spoke to Hashem and he said, the people still aren't doing what I want. The people aren't listening to me. They're moaning. They want to go back to Mitzrayim. They want the food they had. They don't want what I'm giving them. That's how the quails came about, isn't it? Because Hashem was very annoyed, but he gave them the quails.
Yes.
And in some ways, very many things about what you've said, Moshe Rabbeinu never gave up. He still had that humility. He still believed. He still went on. He did his mitzvahs. And the most important thing is he never raised his voice to people. He did everything that he should do in the way that it should be done. He was a living example of how it should be. And to me, very many of the things you've been speaking about tonight go into what I've been reading about. I just wanted to say that because it's really all here.
Wow, tremendous. Thank you for sharing. And maybe
Okay.
you should give us the koyach to keep on doing it.
Every day, in every way.
In good health.
I'll main to that. Have a good week.
Good
Thank
week,
you very
everybody.
much.
Thank you very much for
Thank you.
joining.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye now.
Bye.